Alright Minnesota, you win. I was not planning on making a Minnesota Timberwolves video because I didn't think they were going to actually be this good for a majority of the season. We are 20 games into the NBA season and the Minnesota Timberwolves have a record of 16-4, which is the best record in the NBA. Now, I can admit when I'm wrong, and I didn't think Minnesota was going to be good this year. I thought they were fraudulent. Even like the first 10 games into the season and they still had one of the best records, I was like, yeah, there's no way they can sustain this. I thought they were the 2022 Utah Jazz. I just didn't think they were that good of a team. But honestly, I've been proven wrong. Minnesota is a great team. And there's one reason why this team has done very well, but I don't think it's what you expected. But first, we need to look at how Minnesota even got into this position to be so successful. One of the most important reasons why Minnesota has been so good is because of a trade that was made in 2022. In 2022, the Minnesota Timberwolves would make a trade to acquire Rudy Gobert. At the time, and even a while after, it was seen as the worst trade in NBA history. Now, should we be really judging a trade only a year after it happens? Well, no. But we're all in agreement that the Minnesota Timberwolves getting Rudy Gobert was just not worth it at all, and the Utah Jazz had fleeced the Minnesota Timberwolves. I mean, just think about it from a basic perspective. Having two centers, like that doesn't make sense. I think they were trying to make Cat run the four, and it just did not sound like a good idea. In the first year, everything we said was proven right. And even at the end of the year, with all the chemistry problems they had, we should have known that this was just not a good trade. So what is the difference from last year and this year? Well, there's a couple things we got to look at. Number one, Rudy Gobert has been a lot more aggressive. I've noticed in games that Rudy Gobert is forcing less people to want to go to the rim. Statistically, teams are more likely to pass up on shots to the rim when Rudy Gobert is guarding. And it makes sense. Rudy Gobert is someone that is a former Defensive Player of the Year candidate, which I feel like he could do once again because he's currently the favorite to win the award. And I think it is 100% valid. Rudy Gobert has been the best paint defender in the NBA this season. Now, one of the issues I had with the Rudy Gobert trade is they already had Karl-Anthony Towns, and like I said earlier, I didn't think two centers could work together. I mean, Karl-Anthony Towns had some injuries last year that caused him to miss the majority of the season, so him and Cat just really could not mesh well together. And that's very much understandable, but this year, you know, knock on wood, so far they've been very healthy. And because of that, they've been able to mesh well together. They had the off season, and now they have about 20 games into the actual NBA regular season. And we're seeing this, and this isn't just Rudy Gobert. Karl-Anthony Towns has also had a pretty good year so far. Casuals are going to say that he's been regressing, and statistically he has, but that's because he's kind of taken a back seat. Now, don't get me wrong, 21 points per game is not bad statistically, but Karl-Anthony Towns is usually a guy that can average you about 25 a game. But something we also haven't considered is that Anthony Edwards is having one hell of a season already. In fact, he's having such a good season, people are already starting to question if he's a top 10 player in the NBA. Anthony Edwards so far this season is averaging 26 points per game, which is his career high as of right now. I mean, he's been their number one option, he's having a career year, but I also feel like in a way, he's just elevating his game. Edwards has only continued to progressing, and it's one of the reasons why Minnesota has been so dominant. But I feel like this would be a casual Timberwolves video if I just talked about Anthony Edwards the entire time. Because yes, Ant is one of the most important players on this team, but there are so many factors why Minnesota has been so good. About a couple days ago, I dropped a video on the Orlando Magic, and one of the things I talked about is that their team had a lot of people doing their thing. Of course, the guys like Paulo Banchero and Franz Wagner were important, but the role players is what really made them so good. And Minnesota, they're definitely no exception. 2024 presidential candidate, Naz Reid, is having a career year right now. For one, I believe he should be in consideration for 6th man of the year, but statistically he's averaged about 13 points per game with about 4 to 5 rebounds. But what's very interesting to me is this man is averaging 50, 40, 90 shooting splits. Yes, Naz Reid is averaging 50, 40, 90. I did not think we lived in a world where Naz Reid out of all people was doing that, but hey, he is one hell of a player. Genuinely, what Naz Reid does for the bench is something very impressive, and he is one of the reasons why Minnesota has been the number one defense in the league so far. Minnesota's defense has been amazing this year. It is so good that it has been number one in the league this year. And Naz Reid is one of the biggest reasons why that has been happening. His defensive presence has been amazing. His shot blocking, his rim pressure, it's everything you would want in a backup center. And I'll say it again, is it crazy for me to say presidential candidate Naz Reid should be the Fuck. I was gonna say MVP. Oh my god. Is it crazy for me to say 2024 presidential candidate Naz Reid should in fact be the 6th man of the year? I don't think it's crazy enough to say. Now, I know sometimes I'll make these team videos and people will say, oh, their record is fraudulent, they've played bad teams. Nah, we're not doing that today. Because this Minnesota team, for one, has blown out some of the best teams in basketball. I also remember a certain game versus the Boston Celtics where Anthony Edwards showed up Jason Tatum. I remember that game so much that I left the game thinking, damn, the Minnesota Timberwolves might be contenders. I also remember them blowing out the Denver Nuggets, so it's safe to say they're not just playing bad teams. Minnesota has beaten the good teams when put in front of them. I think there's also something that's kind of obvious that plays into why Minnesota's been so good this year, but straight up, they've just been healthy. Also, gentlemen, we're less than 200 subscribers away from 20K, so make sure y'all boys subscribe. Also, while you're down there, leave a like on the video. Also, each like of the video is one vote for 2024 presidential candidate Nas Reed. I said it earlier in the video, but Anthony Edwards dealt with injuries, Karl-Anthony Towns dealt with injuries last year. I think Rudy Gobert missed a handful of games. In reality, this team just was never fully healthy last year. I pray to God they stay healthy, but Minnesota so far this season has been healthy. I also saw somebody make a point. I don't remember who said it. I'll put it on the screen right now if I see it again. But I heard someone say that there's no longer a power struggle in Minnesota. Earlier in the video, I said Anthony Edwards was the #1 option, and I still agree with that. But Anthony Edwards, Karl-Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert, all three of them are having equally great seasons. Gobert is the best defensive player in the NBA right now. Anthony Edwards is one of the best scorers in the NBA right now. And Karl-Anthony Towns has been one hell of a second option this year. But yet, there could be moments where Karl-Anthony Towns could take over the game, or defensively, Rudy Gobert can have himself one hell of a game. I said this earlier in the video, but Rudy Gobert controls the paint for the Minnesota Timberwolves. He makes people not want to go to the rim. It is statistically proven. Everything that Rudy Gobert has done this season has helped the Timberwolves in more ways than not. I don't know if I necessarily agree with the power struggle thing because I don't think they really had one in the first place. I really do think it just came down to injuries last year because they were injured for so damn long. This season, they're not injured, and I think we're finally starting to see the real potential of this team. I don't think last year it was fair to grade the way this team was just because they weren't able to mesh well together. But now people saying the Rudy Gobert trade was a bad trade, well, they're being proven wrong. Now, at the end of all of this, do we think Minnesota could actually do something in the playoffs? Are they contenders or are they pretenders? I've thought about this for a while because, like I've said, I've been kind of hating on Minnesota. I've been saying I don't think they're contenders. But I think the one game to really convince me that they might actually be contenders was the Boston game. Now you might be saying, oh, you only watched the game because it was Boston. Fuck yeah, I wasn't paying attention until 2for1 put it in Discord and we all started watching it together. But it was in that game where I saw Anthony Edwards bitch Jason Tatum. He straight up outplayed Jason Tatum. The Timberwolves outplayed the Boston Celtics. Also, we gotta apologize to somebody else. Tim Connelly, this guy has done an amazing job for Minnesota. This man got absolutely destroyed by everybody for making the trade for Rudy Gobert. Yeah, we're forgetting that this is the same guy that has not only put together this team, but he also crafted the Denver Nuggets team, the same team that just won the NBA Finals. Now, am I saying Minnesota can win the NBA Finals this year? Maybe. I mean, Minnesota is the only team in the West that I think can actually give Denver a run for their money. They're very good on the defensive side, and I don't know if Denver is going to be able to counter that. Not to mention, I just think this year that Minnesota has been better than Denver. And that's not to say Denver's been bad, but Minnesota, I feel like it's just on a different level this year. And hell, when they went head to head, they did beat Denver. And I know it was just one game, but they straight up blew out the Denver Nuggets. And it's not like it was the Denver Nuggets team that didn't have Jamal Murray, because this was the 5th game of the season. And Jamal Murray was healthy during that game, but they shut down Jamal Murray to just 14 points. At the end of the day, it's only been 20 games, but so far, if the season was to end today, I would say Minnesota is the best team in the NBA right now. But Minnesota, if they want to win the NBA Finals this year, oh, they got some competition. And there is another team, a very young team in the Eastern Conference that might be coming for their throat. The Orlando Magic are having a great season so far, and they might be one of the teams that might be able to hang with Minnesota. But how are they able to have a turnaround so great compared to last year? Well, I talked about it in my last video, go check it out.